The City Council of the City of Port St. Lucie workshop meeting of April the 20th, 2015 is hereby called to order. Madam Clerk, will you be so kind as to take the roll?
Vice Mayor Bartz.
Here, ma'am.
Councilwoman Berger.
Here, ma'am.
Mayor Orvac.
Present.
Councilwoman Martin.
Here, ma'am.
And let the record reflect that Councilman Bowen is not present.
Time for the Pledge of Allegiance. Flag is on stage. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have to be careful because our chairs roll really well on this floor, so make sure that you just don't assume it's behind you. Risk management will have a field day with that. We start with public to be heard, but everyone has signed up for one of the events. No one signed up for general public to be heard. So we'll go on to item 5, discussion concerning Thomas J. White, historical legacy in the city of Port St. Lucie. Councilwoman Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I want to give you kind of a full story on how we got here. So many of you have had conversations over the course of the last couple of years with county commissioners. I know we've had conversations on the workshops before. Unfortunately, Councilman Bowen isn't here tonight, but he's also had this conversation. And that was about how, you know, it's unfortunate that the Met Stadium, Tradition Stadium, was at one point in time, which was referred to as the Thomas J. White Stadium, how it lost the name Thomas J. White along the way when, you know, they started discussing how they could get some revenue. And, you know, it's not anybody's fault. The county commissioners did the right thing by taking a look at that because many cities, organizations, municipalities are making money off of naming rights, so I get it. So I was at a St. Lucie West function on one evening and was informally introduced to somebody, and we were having that conversation, and she happened to know Thomas J. White Sr.'s daughter, and I know Junior. And so as we were chatting, she said, the daughter would love to meet you, she had called her, and wanted to know if we could come together just to chat. And so we made an informal meeting, and luckily Patricia was able to sit in with us too. And the meeting kind of went in a different course. So we started talking about, you know, what they would like to see on naming rights for their father. And they shared stories with us that had just compelling connections to St. Lucie West. And the reality for me is, as you know, St. Lucie West is my district. And St. Lucie West sometimes, because history gets rewritten so often, sometimes only is known for its origins with Levitt brothers and the problematic portions of the development. And people forget how St. Lucie West started as a result of Thomas J. White and how much money of his own he invested in making sure that the I-95 ramp was put in and how he helped to bring in the Mets. And all this significant history is being lost. And so in that discussion, we started with this idea of how could we be able to have a conversation with the Board of County Commissioners that says, we'd love to see the wall, you know, the wall that's in the front of the county stadium, reflect his name, still saying, bearing the name of the, whoever the sponsor may be. So in this case, Tradition Field, Thomas J. White's field at Tradition Field or something along those lines. And then the daughter thought, you know, maybe the interchange at I-95 should really reflect his name, which would of course be, again, outside of our parameters. And then we talked about some of the roads out there in St. Lucie West. But then we really just started talking about stories and the impact that he made to people's lives here, the senior. And it occurred to me that while people are still alive, if we don't capture those stories, we're going to lose that history. And so I called Mr. McAfoose at the Historical Society, and I asked if he would consider partnering with the city in an effort to record some of these stories. So tonight I'm here to share the story of how we started having those conversations, but also to ask the council for permission to allow Channel 20 to start to work with the Historical Society on capturing these stories. And in the same way that they were part of creating the 50th anniversary video, putting together something that would be historically significant about the origins of St. Lucie West and how it influenced the development of Port St. Lucie, especially out west, and then tie it into the Mets. And then from there, I started thinking about, the Mets itself. And you guys know the Mets have had a lot of highlights this year, and there's a lot of people that are really bought into the team this year and engaged. And I believe they're having a 30th anniversary of the opening of our stadium out there for spring training in 3 years. So considering, yeah.
No,
Oh.
I'm sorry, wow,
Yeah.
is my shaking of the head.
Considering how quickly 3 years goes by, and if the council is agreeable to allowing us to start to capture these stories, people are living all over the place now, so we would have to make arrangements for when they do come in. I mean, some of these people that we'd have to interview may not be back again until January next year, when they're back in from snowbird time. I think we could really grab some interest and a compelling story to share and lead into that 30-year celebration, and maybe even have an opportunity to partner with the Mets to celebrate that opening of our spring training camps here in Port St. Lucie. So that's my opening thoughts on what I'd like to do, and I think each of you have an opinion on how we could really start to bring that history back. So this is what I'm doing, is I'm asking you what your thoughts are, what you'd like to see, and for permission to allow Channel 20 to start the prerequisites to getting this all together, and then of course we'd give updates as we go along to council.
Thank you. We first name or last name at these workshops?
We're first name typically.
All right, good
Informal.
job. Michelle, I thought that was a good presentation. Does anyone have feedback?
Mayor,
Ma'am.
I am for that idea. The only question I'd have is, maybe for Mr. Bremer, is just to make sure that staff has time to take on that extra project just within the current staff that they have. I know sometimes they get overloaded on certain things, so that's all. I just want to make sure I'm not overloading everybody.
Sure.
But I think it's great, to build that history. It's a very important piece of our history here. So we should be doing something to help that along.
If it's important to you, we'll make it happen.
Okay?
That's can-do attitude, great. Now, Linda, you look like it was almost like one of your children having a 30th birthday over there. What are your thoughts?
So I didn't quite hear the response, Michelle. You said you talked to Mr. McAfoose,
Yes, yeah.
and did he agree that he would be willing to do that?
Yes, he was going to bring it back to the next meeting at the Historical Society, but just from this, that surface conversation, he was in agreement that that would be right in line with what the Historical Society does, and would love to be able to capture that piece of history as well.
Well, it's another birthday for the city and for the county, and brings back, opening a Met Stadium brings back a lot of memories. We were opening a bank back then, and I can tell you, prior to the actual opening, we did a board meeting in one of the boxes up there until a ball hit the window, and we decided that it was not conducive to trying to run a meeting as well. But it was one of the first games. It was a lot of fun, a lot of excitement. We've seen a lot go on there. Certainly, if we could bring the Mets into this, and I'd like to see the county buy in.
Sure.
And be a part of this, because this really encompasses all of us with what we're doing. I also like the idea of some of those, for lack of a better word, the monuments, the signage. The Mets do a lot for this community. They bring a lot of people in here. We have a lot of people who come strictly because we have Met Stadium here. They're here for the games. I think the opportunity to do a celebration of the Mets, their 30 years here, and certainly of Thomas J. White, who without him, we wouldn't have had a lot of this. So I'm all for it.
I learned in the conversations, I learned a lot, and I don't want to ruin any of the interviews that might happen, but one of the things that really just astonished me just from about a process point of view, the church that's out there in St. Lucie West, St. Bernadette's, that property initially was the property of Thomas J. White Sr., and he wanted to ensure that there was a Catholic church put there because they are devout Catholics, and so he donated that property to the Archdiocese. And when the church was opened and all those ceremonies were going on, the family later learned from the couple of fathers that are out there that they actually had to purchase the property back from the Archdiocese. I didn't realize that that's how it works, within the Catholic organization. So, the intent was to make sure that they could be welcomed and as easily as possible get into the community. And so it's interesting to learn that they had to buy it back for millions of dollars for the property. Just a side note. But, what was another thing I saw this weekend on the front cover of the sports page for the New York Times. I don't know if anybody had a chance to see the New York Times this Sunday, but the front page was Dodgertown and the significance of Florida baseball, minor league baseball in general, and spring training. And so it's definitely, it's a big business. And so being able to celebrate it in a way that might be able to bring some more tourism down, it's not a bad idea. So the partnerships are going to be important. But most importantly, this all started really just because I wanted to try and make sure that we saved the history while we could make sure we captured those stories for St. Lucie West.
Along with that, I would like to see some mention of the senior league that we had here. That's most people, I see Jane is shaking her head, but when I've mentioned it before, people are going, really, what the heck was the senior league? But they were here and they were playing for a couple of seasons. So there's a lot of history for me. I don't know if you know, but my daughter was married in that stadium.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yes, formal wedding in that stadium with a reception out in the parking lot during a rainbow festival.
Wow.
Some years ago, 19 years ago, I think, almost.
Were they barefoot too? And
Pardon me?
were they barefoot and were
I'm sorry.
were they barefoot and running through the field? and
Absolutely
everything?
not. It was formal.
It was formal?
It was, yes, it was a formal wedding. We had the hot air balloons at the time. It turned out to be quite beautiful. So,
That's
I
awesome.
mean, there is some
And good food.
fabulous food. The food was great.
Was there a crab dip there? Yeah. Yeah, right.
We'll
I can't
we'll
even-
have order. No self-promotion from the peanut gallery, please.
I can't imagine walking through the field with the heels on. That's why I was saying that. So if that's okay with the council, it looks like we have consensus, Jeff. So we'll let the Historical Society go ahead and back to their board then and have those conversations, ask them to make sure that they're all good. And then,
Michelle, do I get to comment at all?
Oh, my
before
gosh.
you?
I was
before
running the
go
meeting for
ahead
you. I'm
and-
sorry.
Yeah, thank
go ahead.
So I guess there is consensus, and now we can have it be unanimous for the people that are here. I do have a question for you, though.
Okay.
And that is there a plaque there for Thomas J. White now, but there's no statue? Is that?
Yeah, that's what it is. It's a beautiful plaque. It really is. It's probably about 1.5 feet by 3 foot, maybe 4, and it's on the front pillar as you're walking in. And listen, it's respectable. It's pretty. It's a plaque, but it does not serve as far as really showcasing the impact that's out there. And I think that happens in a lot of communities, but while we have control over it and we're still young enough and we still have a lot of people alive to tell the stories, I think this is where we need to capture it.
Well, I think in excellent communities, they actually do make a point of building the culture. And I think that's why this is so important. And I think that both the stadium and the interchange would be appropriate because in both cases, Thomas J. White ponied up a lot of his own personal funds to make that happen. And that reflects what I call a champion, being a champion. And every community, every successful community has a champion or champions that go out there and invest their money to realize a dream that pushes communities forward. And unfortunately, they don't always realize their dream. Sometimes it's the second or third person to come along, but without them making that large investment, things don't happen. And Thomas J. White came in the late 80s and invested significant resources in giving Port St. Lucie a much different product than what it had from GDC. And until more recent developments like Tradition, St. Lucie West really was the break from 80,000 platted quarter-acre lots. And so it is significant. And as we dream and aspire moving forward, we're going to need champions. You know, when someone asks, well, why don't we have an office building there? Why doesn't someone open up 2 restaurants on the river or 4 restaurants at City Center? Well, we need a champion, quite frankly. We need someone with the vision and the resources to make it happen. And so when someone has done that, we should celebrate them and make them part of our culture. So I support you wholeheartedly. Obviously, partnership's going to be important because it's the county stadium. I respect their right to earn revenue from an asset that all visitors pay for through TDC and other sources. And likewise with the interchange, we would have to go through the state and FDOT, but I'm sure that's something our legislative delegation could help us with if need be. And I look forward to seeing your results on that. And I would just say that everyone should read their history book. There is a Port St. Lucie history book, and there is a section on Thomas J. White in St. Lucie West.
That's right.
All right, sir. Now I think you have unanimous support of moving forward. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Council.
All right, moving on. We have item 6, Port St. Lucie Gatlin Boulevard Intersection Improvement Plan, Public Works.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members, and City Manager. I am Colt Swart, and I'm a Public Works employee as a civil engineer. Tonight, I'd like to bring your attention to the Port St. Lucie Boulevard and Gatlin Boulevard intersection project and the potential improvement options that Miller Lake will be describing to you in further detail. The reason the city staff started looking at this intersection is, as you drive out there, you can notice observable traffic congestions and questionable driving patterns. Additionally, we've had numerous requests for services from city residents, ranging from wanting to increase the turn lane lengths, remove the island/median at the CVS entrance that's on Tulip Boulevard, as well as addressing the entrance at Bravo and the open median on Port St. Lucie Boulevard. Can't hear me? All right. So basically tonight, I'd like to introduce Mr. John Gorham to discuss the improvement options that we are considering at the intersection because of the following requests for services that we've had and the traffic patterns.
Thank you, Colt. Good evening, Mayor, Council.
Good evening.
We prepared this summary presentation after completing the study, and I'll just go through. Okay, let me get a little closer. Okay. It's just an overall aerial location map. It is the location where Port St. Lucie Boulevard and Gatlin Boulevard intersect to the west. This area includes the Bravo, CVS, the Shell station, and the Walgreens. Both Port St. Lucie Boulevard and Gatlin are evacuation routes. We have residential streets that intersect. Port St. Lucie Boulevard is 40 miles an hour there, goes up to 45 as you go further north, and it's 35 in the residential on Tulip on the eastern portion. The purpose of the study was to evaluate the existing issues and incidents that were occurring in the area, crash patterns and peak hour congestion issues because of the businesses and the series of conflict points that occur in these various intersection points, and exploring options during the study and the evaluation of the impacts to the traffic patterns should any intersection improvements be employed, like the closing of the Bravo median. As a result of evaluating the police reports from July of 2011 and through June, so a 2-year study through the 2013, we discovered various traffic patterns and incidents. The incident reports total approximately 3/4 of the crashes occur along the Port St. Lucie corridor in this location. There's various other issues associated with lack of capacity, over congestion, and conflict points along the intersection points. So we broke it down into the various segments. The segment of Tulip Boulevard, we have issues with both the driveways for CVS and Walgreens, so that there are backups on College Park Road trying to make a westbound turn, and the substandard merge lane coming eastbound off of Gatlin and turns from Port St. Lucie Boulevard northbound. And the left turn lane is substandard. There's not enough room and capacity going westbound to go southbound on Port St. Lucie Boulevard. And the island at CVS hinders traffic going through towards the west. So we have conflict movements at CVS, Walgreens, and College Park Road. For Port St. Lucie Boulevard, north of Gatlin Boulevard, there is an issue with the existing signal level of service. The left turn lane stacking is insufficient, and there's issues with the Bravo driveway full access, creating points of conflict. Port St. Lucie Boulevard south of Gatlin, the northbound left turn approach to Gatlin is insufficient capacity. For eastbound Gatlin Boulevard, again, it's a left turn lane that has spillover into the through lanes, causing conflicts and congestion. Going to the solutions. For Tulip Boulevard, the first would be to increase the left turn lane storage a full block back to the College Park Road, install a median to control the capacity of those lanes for the through lane movements, shorten the island at CVS to allow for these increased capacities and additional lane movements, relocate the merge lane to add capacity there in front of the Walgreens, and add a traffic circle at College Park Road to facilitate the U-turns that would be necessary because of the blocking of the intersections there at CVS and Walgreens. Port St. Lucie, north of Gatlin, as we discussed, the full access at Bravo creates a lot of conflict points, so one of the recommendations would be to complete the median there to turn that into a right-in, right-out driveway, still providing access, extend the storage for the southbound left turn lane, thereby allowing more capacity, and at Aviation on the north side, adding northbound left storage and dedicated right turn lanes to accommodate the additional traffic that may result from closing the median. Here again, closing the median, what other issues are at play? And the Bravo being a destination type facility, the people are going to find a way regardless of what we do to the median. So that to accommodate that additional flow of traffic, we are adding right turn lanes on Aviation and then providing for full through lanes and a left turn lane coming eastbound on Aviation. Port St. Lucie Boulevard, south of Gatlin.
Could you go back?
Certainly.
Could you just show me again where the median opening is that you're proposing to close?
Does this thing have a spot? It's right across where it says Bravo. See where the white is? I have a summary slide that has it a little more clearly, but there's a full driveway access in between the trees on the aerial, right across from that corner there, where basically in the southern third of the parking lot frontage between the white concrete areas. So that is now a full point of access. And I'll have a subsequent slide that'll show that in a little bit better detail, because we're at a bigger scale here.
You may want to go back to that slide where you showed the turning movement. If you
Okay.
go there, I think it shows it pretty clearly.
That's a good idea. Thank you, Patricia. You can see the movements on that slide. That's where we're talking about.
Okay.
So there's full left coming out, going northbound, and that's where we have, and the recommended improvements will take 11 conflict points of traffic movements and turn them into 2 conflict points. So there'd be a significant increase in public safety because of this.
Thank you.
Where we were. Okay. Aviation Avenue at Port St. Lucie Boulevard there, we talked about adding those. I already said this one. Lost my place. And south of Gatlin, it was the left turn lane, increasing the storage capacity so that additional left turns on the evacuation route westbound on Gatlin can be accommodated. And because of the improvements to the roadway, ADA compliance upgrades would be required for the sidewalk. So we'd have to replace the sidewalk as a result of that as well. The eastbound Gatlin Boulevard would be solutions are extending the storage for that eastbound left turn lane going north on Port St. Lucie Boulevard. And to accommodate that, we would shorten the storage for the left turn lane approaching Brighton Street southbound. And then there would be an additional right-hand turn lane on Brighton Street approaching Gatlin westbound. This is the summary sheet. It's oriented differently. North is to your right. However, it shows in the yellow is where we are increasing the capacity to the turn lanes to remove existing features. The gray is where the medians are being added, and the traffic circles indicated as a circle with the median there. So we're adding driveway access there, modifying it, and then adding right turn lanes to accommodate the increased traffic flow, and that's indicated in the red. So as a result of these improvements, you would enhance traffic circulation and operational enhancement improvements, increasing safety and reducing conflict points. And we had a meeting with staff on Friday where we tried to do a little update on the research for the traffic movements. And to date, there hasn't been but one traffic fatality in this area, and that involved a bicyclist that was going the wrong way on the street. But other than that, it's just been, fender benders, and but there's been quite a few, and like I said, 3/4 of them are in the Port St. Lucie Boulevard corridor. So these improvements would improve the levels. Yes, sorry. So we're improving the levels of service, and so these improvements, this is a proactive project. Staff is being proactive to have the study done and then have the design up front so the improvements can be accommodated as soon as possible. The fiscal year 2014-2015 money, there's $443,000 available. Anticipate $150,000 for the design, to complete the design. And we would have to explore the best option because DOT has funding for the TPO in the 2017-2018 that is in $520,000. So We need to leverage funds to be able to take advantage of that for construction in that time frame. And based on preliminary cost estimates, it's around $1.2 million for construction and CEI, not including any construction easements that may be warranted. The next step, with the design process, we would have a public involvement program to contact business owners and residents in the area, fine-tune the cost estimates based on the proposal, and then explore different project funding. We've explored different combinations. Here's one combination here. Bottom line is the Port St. Lucie corridor is the most crucial of the improvements. And if you go with the improvements to Gatlin and the blockage at Tulip, you need to do those at the same time as well. So we'd have to explore the best combination of phasing. And obviously getting the plans fine-tuned from preliminary to final and getting it programmed and securing the permits. And that's open for questions.
Thank you. Questions or feedback, council?
Mayor?
Ma'am?
This area, as you all know, is in my district. Over the last year or so, I have had several complaints or concerns with regard to this intersection. I drive it every day, so I see firsthand what the backups look like, and have seen many potential crashes coming out of the Bravo shopping center, where people inch out as far as they can, and many times almost getting clipped because they're out too far, and with some of the speed that is happens, there's a lot of stopping short, and also that is the access point. That right-hand turn onto Gatlin is where people go to get to 95. So I know sometimes there's a lot more traffic in that lane as a result of that, and that having the cars inch out of there from Bravo adds to that backup in the high traffic times. I've had many complaints with regard to the median in between CVS and Walgreens. There's no access to go left, but people have a tendency to do it anyway because they take the chance, and although it's illegal, they want to get out to Gatlin and not have to go around and make, other turns. So in addition, that backup turning right onto left onto Gatlin from the south going north on PSL Boulevard, you have to sit through several light cycles in order to get through that intersection onto Gatlin, making the left when there's high traffic times. So this is definitely something that I think needs to be addressed, so I hope we can move forward in moving this along. I know things take time. I don't like the 2018 timeframe for completion, but I know with funding and the way design works and all the input that it is going to take longer. So if we can move it along, I would appreciate us looking to do that.
Thank you, Shannon. Any additional feedback?
Mayor, just wondering what the communication is looking like for the homeowners that are in that immediate area. I know there's a couple homes that are right there on Port St. Lucie Boulevard, just south of the intersection, and then there's some homes over there by College Park that are affected. But especially, I know there's a home that's just south of Port St. Lucie Boulevard that I've spoke to the homeowner, and he feels as though he's just never quite updated as to what's going on with the intersection. He says, I've been promised for years that this is going to be fixed.
We've had multiple requests for services, as you've mentioned on here, and basically our first mode of contact has been emails back and forth. And as soon as we get more information, we've been sending them out. I know we've had multiple residents talk about, because they can't make the left-hand turn lane on Gatlin onto Port St. Lucie, we get people that go and straight and try and go through College Park Avenue, and they just drive as, they would say, as speed demons on that road to just keep it on moving. So we've had lots of communication with them, but our next step would be to actually conduct a public informational meeting where we invite them out. We go around to the surrounding area, we pass out flyers, we do a citywide email blast, and even maybe advertisements on radio or the PSL's TV station.
Okay. I mean, I think what we can do is, this meeting itself can be put on CDs or DVDs or whatever you call them, and give them to the individuals as we hear from them. But, if you end up doing any kind of, like a trifold pamphlet, because not everybody that's over there is as computer savvy, and so being able to just go by and give them something that has a couple of these photos on it with anticipated movements and anticipated completion date, I think we'll let them know that, the project's still in process and they're part of that process.
I appreciate the concern. Our firm has been involved in a lot of different projects like this, and including DOT projects where there's a public involvement plan, where you have workshops and sometimes several workshops where you roll out a roll plot of everything that's going to be done at a scale that people can point at their house. And we would work with staff on the level of involvement and the scale and the media choices, because all sorts of different things can be done. I mean, you can do fly-throughs and all sorts of animations, but you can also just put an aerial with the proposed design down on a table and sit with people and talk to them about it.
Yeah.
There's different methods.
Because Shannon gets the feedback immediately because it's her district, and there's a lot of people hundreds of people that are impacted because they drive through there, but there's literally maybe 5 houses that you're going to be building directly in front of, and those are the houses that are saying, what's going on. So
Right.
it's really just those 5 houses that need to know kind of now what the plans are because they're asking now. So that'd be great.
We've even done backdoor diplomacy or whatever you want to call it, where you go to the neighborhood and just talk to the people and set up some tables right there, right, so they don't have to come out of their house and drive to the council meetings. Just depends on what staff wants us to do.
It's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Sorry. That intersection has needed work for a long, long time. So I'm really pleased to see that we are coming to the point that we are actually addressing it. So I'm very pleased. My concern would be, like the others, is that we are making sure that we keep the residents and businesses apprised of everything that's going on, so that we have their buy-in to what we're doing.
Well, that's no problem. We can definitely take your considerations, and we will make every outreach possible to the public and get their input.
Is that it, Vice Mayor?
Yes.
All right, well, I'll weigh in too on the access management plan, making sure that we review that with the public. We've certainly been through that rigmarole before. This isn't the first intersection we've done. That's always a sticking point, even when it makes all the sense in the world. Shannon, as you probably know, I have an intimate knowledge of this intersection. I don't want any of them getting the wrong idea over there, but I did work that corner pretty hard over the last year period. I was out there working the street. And what are you doing for pedestrian safety with that in mind? Is there any pedestrian safety element as part of this proposal?
Well, currently we've done the study. So the pedestrian safety, all the upgrades that would be required would be incorporated into the design part, and we haven't started on the design yet. So that would certainly be part of it.
Okay, I just share with you from personal experience. I'm a 6'2", 245-pound pedestrian. I'm pretty, I'm not easy to miss. However, unfortunately, with that hot right coming southbound PSL right onto Gatlin, it never stops, and the controller boxes are of such a height that, let's say that I'm going from the south side of the road to the north side of the road. I'm crossing Gatlin. That controller box will block the view of that person going southbound to make that hot right, and will really almost make it impossible for a pedestrian to cross the road at either rush hour. Pick your poison. But it is very dangerous. I have a lot of time in Miami also, the University of Miami, as a pedestrian. That's one of the, I have feared for my safety and my children's safety in that intersection in ways that I have not feared in other places. So I'd really appreciate it. I totally support moving forward with this project and get it on the schedule. I would just hope that the staff could find a way to address pedestrian safety, even if it's even coming up with a shorter control box or something else that improves sight lines, because it's the controller box plus the way that the pole is positioned in a constrained right-of-way that really gives you a big dead spot, and I don't want that to become a literal dead spot. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Any additional thoughts or comments? No? All right, well, it'll be another exciting project. So will that go on to the capital improvement plan? Yes. Okay, so it'll be fun watching these. Of course, it'll never happen soon enough, but it's good to see the progress and moving forward. Thank you. Okay, we had 7 removed from this agenda, so we're on to 8, discussion concerning options for beverage and catering service at Civic Center, Parks and Recreation / legal.
Maybe I'll just start off by framing the issue. We are approaching the end of our first contract for catering services at our Civic Center. And as a part of my review of the process that took place the first time, there were some overall discussions as to the direction that the city should take as to how we're going to provide our hospitality unit with a caterer. And during those discussions, I think the full gamut was discussed as to whether or not we would focus on a single caterer, or whether or not we would open up the process to a multitude of caterers. In my review of the contract, it did provide a couple of different opportunities for us. One is to renew the contract. 2 is to go out to RFP. And in my review, and my decision and direction to staff was to go out to an RFP, to take a look at what our options and what our opportunities are. As a part of that process, we did have some meetings, a number of meetings, and I've been approached by a number of different individuals who really are suggesting that maybe we open up the process and maybe we explore the potential of having, multiple vendors or multiple caterers available to the city for our discussion. There was, my biggest concern that I had is that my name's on the liquor license. And so I had some initial issues with respect to having the city's name on a liquor license as a co, knowing that we might not be responsible or accountable for actions that a caterer who holds a liquor license may embark on. So at first my effort was, I don't want the liquor license. And I had tasked Staff Attorney Brennan Keeler with taking a look at whether or not there were options for us to explore outside of the city retaining the liquor license, which he has done, and he has talked to the state. And in fact, we had the state agent in, and she spoke to us as recently as last week, 2 weeks ago maybe. So we looked at all the potentials. I've been in this situation once before. We tried a multitude of different options. I think for the purpose of the general discussion today, one of the things that we really honed in on is we think that in the best interest of the city, it's probably a good idea to move forward with a single caterer, with perhaps having a secondary caterer available to us. However, having said that, I think that if there's sentiment and you probably hear from some individuals or some companies tonight that would like us to have the broadest palette of availability. And I'm not opposed to having we haven't done the RFP, I'm not opposed to having alternates so that we can explore that. And you'll hear from staff the issues that we have discussed around the table as to having multiple vendors that are available without having a single caterer that has a liquor license. And so I'm sure Brennan will cover the legality of the liquor license itself, and Tanya will go over the report that we in consensus have agreed to put together for you this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Bremer. Just briefly, I did prepare a memo that went to the city manager and assistant city manager. I laid out as succinctly as possible the different scenarios. Essentially, there are three. If you were going to make a flow chart to answer this question of how to proceed with the catering situation at the Civic Center, really the first question that you would need to ask is, do we keep our liquor license or do we relinquish it? And basically, if we keep it, we're regulated by Florida Statute 561.20, which is an SCX. It's a 4COP SCX. That license is particular to civic centers. So you have to be a government entity. It has to be approved via ordinance. Then you can go to the state, get your liquor license. We own that liquor license. We are the holders of that liquor license. Our name is on that license, and it always will be. We can add third parties to it, and they operate under our guidance, under our control. So we go as the third party goes. And it should also be said that so long as we have that SCX license, no other entity can serve alcohol at the Civic Center. And that's due to Florida Administrative Code. And it's in my memo, 61A-3.017. As a result of that, as I said, we are responsible for the beverage, the service of beverages at the Civic Center. So it must be managed and controlled at all times by the licensee, which is us, the City of Port St. Lucie.
Brian, sorry.
I'm sorry, yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
So if we do that solely, that means city staff would be serving liquor to?
No, not necessarily true. We actually can serve. That is true. We could serve it. City staff could, but we wouldn't be exclusively the provider of alcohol. We could actually, because of the caterer that would also be on our license, they can as well. So through them as well. So that's why we have to add that person too. And as Jeff mentioned, getting alternates on there, we can add them as well. We discussed that with ABT, not only in person, but over the phone as well. And they clarified that for us.
Okay. I just don't like the idea of our employees serving liquor to people. I don't think that's a smart thing to do.
If we relinquish the SCX license, under what license would we be serving when we do serve?
We would no longer be serving. We'd be out of the alcohol business altogether at our events.
What type of license would the caterers be utilizing?
It's a 13CT. On the second page of my memo, it references the 13CT license. That's regulated under Florida Statute 561.20 as well, just a different section. And there are particular requirements of the caterers under that statute. Most notably, they cannot serve alcohol unless they're also serving food. And I believe, and Tanya can correct me on this, I believe they have to generate at least 51% of their revenue from food service. So your primary, I guess, revenue stream has to come from sales of food, not alcohol.
And there's no such thing as a different type of license that allows special events to operate and serve alcohol independent of food?
Yeah.
A nonprofit does have the ability to just serve alcohol for a 3-day special permit that they would receive. A nonprofit is allowed to get 3 of those licenses a year. Also, there is one more that would allow someone to just serve alcohol at the Civic Center inside. It's a 4COP quota. However, that caterer can do just alcohol, but there must be someone else who's got the catering license on site doing the 51% of the food. So you could have 2 people, ultimately, that is a scenario, that you could have a someone with a 4COP quota and a caterer two separate people involved. Or you could have someone who has the 13 CT, and they could do both.
Okay, now, if they had the 13 CT, you're maintaining that you have to do 51%, you have to do 51%?
According
Of
to,
food?
yes, you have to, yes.
Okay, so I asked the former to get to the latter, so it is possible, you have to have you have to have a caterer and basically an alcoholic beverage license holder on site. What's the extent of the catering necessary? Like, let's say I had a boxing match, and I had my drinks provider providing drinks, and I had my caterer providing popcorn and hot dogs. Is that catering? Is that
That would
legit?
not, that would, according to the person from ABT that we had this specific discussion with last week, according to her, no, that would not suffice.
Okay, so what is sufficient?
It would have to be, you would have to provide receipts. If it was questioned, you'd have to provide receipts showing the sale of the food is 51% and the, or more, and the beverage was 49% or less.
Do you know if a bar and grill restaurant is subject to a similar provision where they have to provide 51% of sales through food versus alcohol, by any chance?
From what research I've done, I don't believe that is the case. I think it's particular just to the catering portion of it, but I'll let Brennan, I think he has some information.
I have, what I have is a chart from actually ABT, and it's 7 pages of the different licenses that you can have. It's kind of like a regulatory nightmare, and understandably so. I mean, we're talking alcohol. It's all a function of, we regulate alcohol because of taxes and, safety issues as well. So we need to know where the alcohol is going, who's selling it. So I can find out the answer to that question.
And maybe I'll just get a copy of that.
Sure, absolutely.
Regulatory framework nightmare. Thank you. Did you have a question, ma'am?
I do. So, this goes back to an original conversation that we had a while ago when I asked Jeff, or used an example, went down south at a different time of my life to, arrange for a party. Walked into a country club, golf course country club, and I have one choice of who I can hire for beverages, because that's what they do. And then I had 4 choices of who I could do for food, but all they're going to do is food. And these all are on the same playing field, so basically all their prices were very competitive, and they invite you to come like once a month to do a tasting, really, really organized, just a really great thing they put together. And there's only one person that's going to provide that alcohol. So if I want alcohol at this place, this is who I'm using, because that's the contract they have with them. So in trying to figure out how did that work, that's because that one person, so if we put out an RFP separate with the 4 COP quota, or 4 COP, whatever you call it, that person, we put out an RFP that just says, that's what we're looking for. We want one individual to do the beverages. And then we have the opportunity to have an RFP that opens it up to be able to have multiple caterers, be able to compete and be able to offer services. And we can cap it at a certain number when we select it from a short list, but it does enable for choices. And from my point of view, and I was on the council when we did the original vote, I've heard the concerns and feedbacks on maintenance, but I have heard along the way people say they would love to have a choice. And I have heard along the way that people have made choices to not schedule events at our Civic Center. And so people have choices, right? And that's the choice they decide to go with. But when they want a large facility, sometimes they don't have a choice. And when they come here, and they're not happy with it because we don't have a choice, then, that doesn't put us in a good light. It's our brand. It's the Civic Center. They don't see it as the caterers. They see it as the Civic Center. And so from my point of view for this discussion, I still would like to see us be able to do that. Separate RFP for something that fulfills the need of the beverage, which is the 4 COP, because that's separate than what I think you were saying was available, but that's what my researcher showed me. And then a separate RFP that allows us to get really some qualified caterers in to bid on it and then be able to get a short list.
I thank you. I didn't want to interrupt you because you were right in the middle there. I think we interrupted them with our questions regarding the alcoholic beverages. So do we have any additional questions on the alcoholic beverages? Otherwise, this is a tag team, right? He hasn't even tagged you in yet. Okay. And then before we get into deliberations, we have some people who have signed up to speak. So do we have any additional questions on alcohol? Because was that a natural breaking point for you to tag your partner? Oh,
It can be. Just the last I guess, scenario I was going to cover was the relinquishment of our SCX license, which your question actually was regarding that. So I can tag Ms. Taylor.
Actually, I do have a question that relates
Okay.
directly to this.
Sure.
So just say, in that scenario, we did something like that, just say, that one person who has the liquor license and the city no longer has any part of the liquor license, because that's what we're talking about here, right? Walks, and that event is scheduled, 3 events are scheduled that week. What happens then? Now you have an event where people have a party planned, no matter what it is. The person providing the alcohol walks, and how do we provide them, make sure their event happens if we have no liquor license backed up in order to make sure that they're covered? How does that happen?
I defer to Ms. Taylor.
Ultimately, we would try to find another caterer that has the 4COP quota license that would allow for that, or potentially the caterer that's providing food, if they had the 13 CT, we would then try to look at that. It would be difficult, but we would make every effort to accommodate our clients to make sure that they're taken care of at the end of the day.
And so, on the flip side, what would happen if we maintained the city having a liquor license? Who then would be able to serve the alcohol and use our liquor license if you didn't have to do all that scrambling, say if you had a day's notice?
Whoever held the license that Mr. Keeler referred to, the SCX license, whoever's on that license would then be allowed to fulfill those needs for the client.
So if I don't want to interrupt,
No,
but
I'm trying to look at everything.
It is complicated.
Yeah.
just raised a question in my mind. Is it okay?
sure. Shannon, are you cede the floor to the manager?
Yeah. So can we still accomplish what has been suggested by maintaining our own license? Because if we can we just go out, maintain our license, go out for a 4COP, and then at least, if something comes to pass where they can't do that, then maybe we can have a backup of our own staff that is trained in order to do that. Is that a potential possibility for us that would get beyond that?
I look behind me because I wanted to make eye contact with Renee Major. Sorry, it's too loud. Just to find out basically how they would view that. I think there's a lot of liability, dram shop liability involved with that, serving alcohol as staff, that I'm not sure we want to undertake the risk with that. But that's I'll defer to Ms. Major on
And then
that.
finally, can we have more than one 4COP? I think that what I heard is we can have multiple names on our license.
On the one that we hold,
Yes,
that is
so
correct, yes.
So that's my question,
Yes.
is that if maybe we go out for a primary and a backup for both,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the 4COP, so that if the primary fails, then we have a backup.
Correct.
So
That would
that's a
work.
potential as well, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay, well, all right, I get that, and I understand what all this is. However, I have a contractual question. So I read through the current contract holder's contract with the city, and I read that they have till 6 months before the end of their contract to indicate to us whether they want to continue, correct?
Correct. Correct.
And has that happened yet?
Not that I'm aware of. I have not received anything in writing. I don't know if Cheryl and OMB has received anything. No.
So then, we're doing this in anticipation of that not happening, because then the next question is, reading the terms of the contract, unless we're just going to say we're terminating for no reason, unless there is a material default, or if there's no agreement as to terms and price. If the current contract holder does put that in, then we have to have that conversation first. That's how I read the contract, and that was my conversation that I had with Ms. Booker regarding this.
Okay.
So,
I don't know what that means, so I'm looking for that. What does that mean?
The conversation, and it wasn't provided in your backup, but I do have copies of the existing contract. If any of you would like to take a look at it, I did bring extra copies as the question was raised this afternoon. Under the termination section on page 13 of 26 of the agreement is what Ms. Martin is referring to. We would have to give him 30 days notice with cause. Without cause, it would be a 180-day notice that would be required if we're going to terminate this contract and go the RFP route, was one of the questions that was raised.
It says shall, not may.
It doesn't say shall or may. It says the city may terminate this contract with cause by giving the vendor a 30-day notice, or without cause by giving the concessionaire 180 days notice in writing.
It said may.
Yes.
It said may.
Yes.
May versus shall. I mean, at the end of the day, it's our contract. If, if we want to change it, we can do the right thing and give what is 180 days, 6 months?
6 months.
So six months of contract. I mean, I don't know that we have any contract out there right now. I just sent Brennan an email today about the conversation we're having around cell towers at 120 and versus 6 months. We don't have anything out there that's 6 months.
So my takeaway from this is that we are contemplating an RFP for something that we would have to give 6 months notice on before we could effectively make a change.
Before we could exercise an RFP option?
Yeah. That's something I'd like to see as part of the packet in the future.
Now, thank you for bringing that up, because had we not known that little detail, we could have said, you know what, let's wait on this discussion, pushed it off, and without anybody else telling us this, and next thing you know, we're within that timeline, that scope, and then we'd have to argue the may versus shall discussion, which we win anyway, by the way. And, we're here to make sure, utilizing the conversation we had the other night and running parallel with the conversation, that we offer fair opportunities for everybody to do business here. And so something like this, yeah, definitely should have been part of the backup where we could know what we're discussing. I mean, it puts us in a corner.
Absolutely. In fact, if there's no further questions from council, I'm going to ask for a 5-minute recess.
Sure.
We're going to be adjourned for recess for 5 minutes. Good? We're back. All right, thank you for that break. Before we get back into it, just wanted to read this into the record. Section 22, entitled Termination of the Existing Catering Contract for Civic Center Food and Beverage. The city may terminate this contract with cause by giving the vendor a 30-day notice, or without cause by giving the concessionaire 180 days notice in writing. So that's a controlling factor there, because unless there is cause, you got to provide written notice and wait 180 days. Of course, a lot of things could happen in that time period, I imagine, including an RFP and the evaluation process, and just could not be implemented until 6 months from the date of notice. So with that factual basis to ground us in our continuing discussion, did you make the tag? Did you make the
tag me
tag?
in?
Yeah, she's in the ring.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
And in this corner, Shannon, are you done with your questions? Okay, for now. Oh,
Well, hopefully with-
there's going to be a lot more questions.
And perfect, that's what we want. And just to be clear, too, we are at that point now, and that is part of the reason for being here, is to make that decision, and we can proceed accordingly in regards to following what the contract calls for, 180 days. We are within that. And we knew that going into this process, that we had that time frame available to us. So, you know, that's why we're here. So hopefully that part of it, we've gotten that part straightened out. What you do have, I believe I'll have a copy of this kind of matrix that we put together just to kind of, in a somewhat clear and concise way, go over the options that we do feel are available, some that you've already even discussed with us a little bit already, and our thoughts on the pros and cons of all of them. All 4 options we present do have possibilities, and they also have, you know, challenges associated with them for whatever direction you decide for us to go in. The first option would be very similar to what we're doing already. We do, as Mr. Bremer said, an RFP would go out. We would select, through the competitive process, a concessionaire under a new contract with the City of Port St. Lucie, co-holding the SCX liquor license, the 4COP, as we currently have. We co-hold with our current provider that 4COP SCX license. We would also, through the competitive RFP process, select a second caterer that would also be on the license and be able to provide food and beverage should the first selected caterer be unable to fulfill their contract. So we would have the wording in there that we would have the ability, should we feel they're in default or cannot provide what we need from them, then we would easily be able to bring the second caterer on board with very little downtime. The pros with that, we feel, are consistent quality product, return client expectations, and more familiarity with staff, especially for our repeat customers. It works well for us now, best customer service option to our clients. Everything is in one place. When you come there, most of our clients do like the fact that they can do their one-stop shopping, where they can come in, meet with us, meet with the caterer, take care of whatever their needs may be. We can oversee the options, and we can oversee the kitchen. We do have a 4,000 square foot beautiful kitchen. I know that most of you, if not all of you, have seen it before. And we know the product. We can make corrections as needed. This helps ensure our quality. This process would be done as through the competitive process. So it is open to anyone out there that has the ability and can fulfill whatever we would expect them to do. They can do multiple events on the same day. It should be noted last year that we had 12 days where we had multiple events going on at the same time that required food and beverage. And it also, one point we do need to bring out is the fact that the current provider also, in their contract, has to provide food and beverage at our request for our city functions at cost plus 10%. Also, it's important to note that with our in-house sales, meaning in-house events, our ticketed events, it's the community band, comedy show, wrestling, those types of events allow us to use the exclusive provider to provide the food and alcohol. And again, the 5149 does not take into effect. If we do not use this, if we do not go this route, then we would be limited on how we can then offer events that just have alcohol or more alcohol than food at those events. We would have to look at a different process there. There are cons to this way, and we've talked about those already. It limits our smaller caterers from having an opportunity to come in. We recognize that. Having an on-site caterer for a period of time can make the caterer at some points complacent, and we can lose business to other venues, locations, because we do require on-site caterers to use customers to use our on-site catering company. Our option number 2, we talk about, this was already mentioned up by Councilwoman Berger, and this was similar to your experience, I believe, with the Exclusive for alcohol, which would be the 4 COP, we would still stay on the license as for an emergency basis, and we would have multiple food providers. This would also be done through the competitive process. They could be selected, those who are able to, what we feel, fulfill the needs that we have at the Civic Center. The pros with that is there's definitely more opportunity for our caterers out there. We have some outstanding caterers in our community that do a wonderful job. I know they do events here. They've done events at the Botanical Gardens and other venues around the city. It does provide selection for those clients who may be looking for other options, and it may provide a better selection for the clients. And in this way, we could still do our in-house events. So we would still be able to have a provider of the alcohol services under the city's 4 COP, excuse me, that can provide those needs for the ticketed events that we have. We had approximately 70 in-house events last year that also grossed more than $75,000 in ticket sales. And again, those are events like our community band, wrestling, comedy shows, and the such. So I think that's important to note. The cons with this, it's more difficult for staff to manage. Instead of the staff dealing with one caterer, now the staff will be responsible for coordinating with multiple caterers during their process during the day. And the one-stop shop would no longer be an option for us there. We'd have to verify licenses, make sure the room is set up per what the caterer would like. Time and delivery would be important to us, and we'd want to monitor that. And I would suggest if we do go that route, there would be a evaluation process like anyone else, and if they, do not perform to our standards, they would be put on some type of notice. And if they were to, just like anybody else would, if they were to, continue to have the issues, they would no longer be on our preferred provider list. There would be less accountability. At this time, we do, working in-house, as we all know as part of the contract, we do receive a percentage of what the caterer brings in for the use of the kitchen. And even when he does off-site catering, he also provides 10% of what he makes on those events. And again, with that is, it could be problematic for collection. We would still have to come up with a system for the caterer that is using the facility to have some type of fee involved for, even if the entire kitchen wasn't used, we would still have to work some logistics out with each individual caterer. It does come down to the maintenance of the kitchen. I would suspect that some caterers would want to have access to that kitchen. One of the things that happened after Aramark left us in late 2009 is they left us with the smallwares, and that was truly a blessing and allowed us to really have the turnkey operation, because immediately we were able to bring in our emergency contractor, food provider, who was able to step in within days and start taking over operations of the food and beverage, because all of that equipment was there.
Great.
Yes, ma'am, you may ask a question.
The 10% that you're saying the current contract or the current vendor gives 10% back when they go to different events outside the city, is that something that's in the contract, or are you saying that that's what they do out of like the goodness of their heart?
I believe that's in the contract. I want to say that was an amendment at some point that we did that.
Okay,
that it was
so
10%.
that could be part of the additional, that could be part of contracts in the future.
Absolutely. And
What was the value of that?
There was 14 off-site catering jobs. I don't have the total value of that. I apologize, but I can get that for you.
Yeah, if you're going to bring it up as a significant point in making your assertions, I would definitely want to know what the monetary value is of that. And then how do you audit the caterer to know that 14 events is the actual number of events that occurred?
We go by what sales reports they turn into us, the contracts that are existing. Obviously, I do know most of the time when there would be, and staff knows, when there are events taking place and going in and out of the kitchen.
Do you have any procedural controls in place?
In regards to, I don't know of anything that I could do technically to control that at that point, but when they turn in their monthly report, all of that is attached with it.
Okay.
So, and that, we can, we can definitely address that for the
So
future.
right now, it's the honor system?
It is.
Okay. Do you have any, I intercepted the floor from you.
That's okay.
Do you have any questions?
I guess I'm just trying to understand also what it is. So if a current contractor or a future contractor takes a job, basically, at another event somewhere else, and they have to prep the food for that event, they are able to utilize the city's kitchen, the city's electricity, all the, the maintenance that goes into it, and all the, like you said, the small essential potwares and that kind of thing to create it, and then they can transport it, have the event, and then 10% of whatever they gain comes back to the city. But was that like in an effort to have net zero?
I think if I'm not mistaken, at the time, it was an opportunity to generate additional revenue. I will be honest, I don't believe it is thousands and thousands of dollars for our 10% back. I don't know that it would bring us to a net zero. So if that's what you're asking in
Yeah, I
regards
just don't
to-
know. I mean, I can't remember, that part of agreeing to that with the contract and what we were attempting to do, because, certainly, like I'm thinking about, I don't know, that made me think about like cities that have culinary incubators, where they allow small businesses to develop, and they come in and they utilize the kitchen at certain times. They have 2 hours apiece or whatever, and then from there, they go off. And so part of that business case that these cities provide is how much it costs to run the kitchen during these hours, and then they consider that kind of like mitigation, but like an investment into small businesses. And so that at the end of the year, they're saying, we spent a total of arbitrary number, $12,000 in electricity and time, that somebody else may have been able to rent this kitchen, but 7 to 10 businesses were able to flourish and now move on to their own space, and create a small business. And so they actually connect the numbers based on like the usage of the kitchen versus creating the small business, and they consider that an investment. So here we're not doing that, but we're helping a business get more business, one business, outside of the city, but taking up the time and space in our place. And I just don't know that 10% covers it, and as Greg had asked, without auditing purposes, I guess we'll never know.
I can give you that number after, I can definitely prepare a subsequent memo with that information. Any of the information I'm unable to provide today, I will provide you in a supplementary memo.
Well, I think just as a point of clarification, you were asserting that we could know the 10% of reported transactions, but we couldn't know if anything was unreported.
That's right.
Because there are no controls in place. Am I correct in
That's
that?
right, there's no controls.
So-
And these questions, like, I'm sorry I didn't have them available to you beforehand, because I didn't know what we were going to be going over or anything today, but that's just the kind of stuff
Okay.
that's running through my mind as we're talking.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And Shannon, are there any other rent provisions that we should know about? I mean, we have I say this tongue in cheek, but I know that you probably know. So we have the 10% for when they use our kitchen, which I think of basically as rent. Hey, you get to use our kitchen for your own gig. And then we get the percentage of everything they do in-house. Is there anything else that I'm missing? Jeff? Tanya?
The contract does provide a section relative to commission payments, and there are a variety of commission payments that are connected to the contract. There's a 15% commission rate from Civic Center annual catering sales of $0 to $500,000, 20% commission rates from incremental annual Civic Center catering services of $500 and $750, and then it goes up to 25% for $750 and above. There's also some language in here relative to the cafe, but that's not
That's
a part
no
of this
longer-
contract.
no.
And then it has 10% or $300, whichever is greater for outside catering.
And what have the annual catering sales been running at?
Last year, the 13-14 fiscal year, total catering sales were a little more than $400,000.
Is that the tax and non-tax line items in the budget on the revenue side?
In regards to the revenue that the city receives from that, that is taxable, if that's what you're asking, our percentage,
Okay.
that is taxable. And our take on the commission, our commission for the 13-14 year was a little more than $45,099.34.
Okay. And any additional questions right now, or shall we turn it back over to Tanya?
I do.
Get another question?
Yeah, this is probably for Jeff, though. Did I just hear you say that the contract referenced the cafe still?
Yes.
There was a amendment to the contract ending his use of the cafe as we pursued the fact to have Cafe Luna in the cafe.
So is that before the owners of Cafe Luna were in there, or you're saying post? When did the amendment occur?
The amendment occurred, let's see, March 1st, 2012. Relinquish operational rights and remove the area known as Cafe from the contract as described in Section 1. This will not change the current rent amount. Other conditions of the original contract will apply.
Okay, so is that but like towards the back of this one that I have, or? I mean, I'll take your word for that, it's just not in this one, though. All
It's
right,
not
then-
in there, Ms. Berger.
It's not. All right, so then on this one, on page 4, it says for the concessionaire, responsibilities and specific duties. Maybe this is fixed somewhere else, but it says a concessionaire must obtain and pay for the 4 COP liquor license before the effective date of the contract and maintain this license in good standing. The city must be listed as a co-owner. So are we actually the only owner of that license?
That is correct. We are listed with Dominic's Catering.
So are we the owner and he's the co-owner, or, I mean, because this specifically says that he's supposed to obtain and pay for the 4 COP liquor license, but that's not the way I was understanding that we had that license.
That is co-held.
Yeah, I read that provision too. And we co-own it. If you look at the statute for an SCX, it belongs to us. So I think the way the clause is in the contract, it could be rewritten to reflect that we're the owner and the caterer is the co-owner of that. Because if he were to be removed from the license, even if administratively it was removed, whether because of violations from ABT or what have you, it automatically reverts back to the city. So we are the owner.
So we're the owner.
Correct, but just like Mr.
And we
Bremer
have to-
had to go and get his name put on the license, because we have to do that every time there's a change in the city manager position to reflect who is the holder of the license for the city. So the caterer has to actually go and provide the same information, fill out the paperwork, and get their name on the license. They have to do that separately from us.
So just from a housekeeping standpoint, did we change that in the amendment as well? Or is that semantics?
I think it's fine. I mean, a co-owner, I think that would establish sufficiently that they own it as much as us. But at the end of the day, the statute's going to override what the contract says.
And then, so since we're co-owners, does that mean that this license can be utilized outside of the city of Port St. Lucie?
No, it actually can't be utilized outside of the Civic Center.
And has this license been utilized outside of the city of Port St. Lucie?
I'm not sure. I can't answer that question.
I asked that question to city management not too long ago. Did we ever get an answer on that?
I was told no.
I am not aware of any time that it was used outside of the city civic center.
Can we do
Of
a
that
public
license.
record search, please, for the name of our license or number and see if it shows up anywhere else in a bid? Thank you.
Any additional questions, or we'll turn it back to
Thank you.
staff for completion of the presentation?
We are now to option 3, eliminate the on-site for COP license and open up to all qualified food and beverage caterers. This is where we would then have to make sure that if an event had alcohol, that it would have to be the 5148 in this, 49, I want to say 48, 49 in this option. This option does give, the option does give the most options for our clients. It could potentially increase room sales, especially for smaller groups that are looking for options. And the city is off the license. The liability concerns issues would no longer be in play. There would be less accountability. Again, must follow the laws regulating the food and alcohol. It would be very labor intensive due to monitoring and verifying qualifications. We'd now be unable to provide that service to our in-house events. We again would have to look at how we would be able to operate our in-house events that mainly have alcohol and very little food. And similar of some of the other ones that I had already stated. The final option, which we wanted to put in here because it is an option, is the city just takes over and they do it all themselves. I think we've heard that that's not probably the most viable option, but it does allow us to have complete control of inventory, what goes in and out of the kitchen, what's served to our guests. We keep control of pricing, inventory. We do have the potential to subcontract if needed. We could have more discretion on the pricing to make the sale at the end of the day. And we would have to look, it could be a pro, it could be definitely more revenue, or it could not be. It depends on, you know, at the end of the day, getting into the food and beverage business, there's a reason why we do what we do now, but I think it is important to put this one on here. It could be very labor intensive. You're talking, you know, do we want to be in the food and beverage business? Does the city want to do that? Very high liability issues. And it does take away the potential for our local businesses and local caterers. But I think it was important to mention that. These are what we came up with as our pros and cons to the different options. And I think tonight we were hoping to get a consensus on how you would like us to proceed with the process, with the RFP, and how we would want to move forward with that. And obviously we're here for any more discussion and questions that you may have.
Thank you, ma'am. Council, do you have any questions for staff before we go to the public comments?
I'm debating whether I want to ask my questions now or wait. I'm going to wait.
Okay.
I'll wait too.
Linda, you want to wait? Okay. First up is Jane Reynolds. You could just go to that podium right there, ma'am. State your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Jane Reynolds, and I own Silver Platter Entrees. We're a catering company located on Village Green Drive in Port St. Lucie. And I'm interested in giving some opinions about opening the Civic Center up to multiple caterers. I do only outside catering. I don't have a venue. And I work with lots of venues all over Martin, St. Lucie, Okeechobee, and Indian River counties. And when I go to a venue, I work with the venue staff. We respect the venue. We take care of it. These venues around the area are rented constantly. I have some numbers here from Martin County, some venues down there. According to the Civic Center staff, there were 7 weddings held at the Civic Center last year. I do that in a month. If you open it up to other caterers, we will be your voice. We will bring business to you. I would love to be able to market the Civic Center. I am currently doing events at Lexus of Fort Pierce because they can hold over 300 people. I would love to be able to bring these people to the Civic Center. It's not more work. It doesn't entail anything. If you look at the Martin County Parks and Rec Department, they have 2 people who run 4 venues, and they do it very efficiently. So I encourage you to open it up to multiple caterers and allow us to be out there as your voice and as your marketing and sales department. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next up, Jim Freitas.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jim Freitas. I'm the owner of DiMichelli's, my partner Julianne.
Could you set your address for the record?
It's 473 Waters Drive. That's in Fort Pierce. You know, we currently hold DiMichelli's at Meadowwood, DiMichelli's at Fairwinds, the fairgrounds, the Fence Center, all the baseball fields in St. Lucie County. We also have Sandridge Golf Course. We have Bottoms Up, a Raw Bar in Fort Pierce. We have 12 kitchens overall. And then we own Bottoms Up Beverage. It's one of the biggest mobile bar services in the state. And we do go all over the state with our bars. I think that the city is kind of missing the boat a little bit by having one caterer. Of course, I'd love to be that one caterer, don't get me wrong here. But at the same time, if allowing other caterers to come in, it opens up more business for everybody else. We currently have 100 employees right now, and I'd like to keep them all busy. I'd like to have 200 employees. But at the same time, all the caterers here tonight are very good at what they do. And I watch them do 50 people. I watch them do 500 people. We all do that. But I think the main thing that you guys really need to look at is the mobile bars and the liquor licenses. The 4 COP, which we have, goes all over the state of Florida. And it'll also provide the services for all the other caterers in the area, which is a really good thing. You know, I know we're talking about percentages here and percentages there. Is it going to be a gross number? Is it going to be a net? Gross is always the way to go because then there's no lying to anybody. It is what it is. And what you're also missing is you have a lot of festivals right in the street. With the current license that you have now, you can't do them. It's impossible with that license. With our license, we'd be able to do all the festivals in the area, and the city would make more revenue. And that's the bottom line at the end of the day. Everybody making more money with responsible people taking care of your beverage. And at the same time, allowing all the other caterers to make a living. The mobile bar service can go all over the state, which we do. So we have 14 trucks, trailers, that goes all over the state. And the way to regulate it is we would just get the city, whoever is involved in it, to look at our contracts so they know what goes on. You know, we have 7 weddings that were done this year on premise, and now we have 14 that we don't have a number for. What is that number? Is it a gross number, a regular number? How much? So if you did it the right way, we'd all know what the numbers are tonight. But it's obviously that, you know, we'll find out tomorrow, we'll do this and we'll do that. But to me, it's not transparent. With the 4 COP and the other caterers in the area, everything will be transparent. And there'll be a lot more money to be made all over the state. And we'll be able to employ a lot more people. And at the end of the day, Port St. Lucie needs jobs. So, of course, I'd like to have the catering all to myself, but I don't really think it's necessary. I think the mobile bars and a liquor license needs to be a 4 COP, which I might add is $150,000 today. 6 months from now, it may be 190. I don't know. But there are a lot of other people that really need to do these jobs. So that's basically what I have to say, and I hope you guys make a good decision tonight. Thank you.
Could you just hang on one second? I have a question for you. Under your scenario with the 4 COP, is that with one beverage vendor at the city, or it's each caterer bringing in a 4 COP?
See, the thing is, when you have multiple caterers and they all have a 13 CT, you cannot use that license but once. So if I come in with my 13 CT, which I have, and I have to do 51% food, and Jane wants to do hers, if I'm there first, she's done. She has no liquor, that's it. Only one license. That's the problem with trying to do multiple caterers. And the other thing that people don't realize is if you have one liquor guy, and we sit down and we say, okay, Jimmy, listen, it has to be this much per person. What that does, it levels the playing field for the rest of the caterers. Because if we're doing it for $15 a person, round number, whatever, okay, the caterer comes in and goes, well, the liquor is going to be $15, and the food is going to be this, and this is going to be this, and then we get the jobs. If you get a guy that's greedy and says, hey, I got the contract, you got to get $28 a person, I'm doing them a disservice because now they can't get the job. Like they said, Martin County has venues all over the place, and that's the problem. You have to have a responsible beverage guy to make sure that the level is level.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Lynette Marafa?
Good evening. My name is Lynette Marafa. I am a St. Lucie resident, not a caterer, but I am an event producer. I live at 2833 Southeast Eagle, and I do own a business on Port St. Lucie Boulevard, 698 Southwest Port St. Lucie Boulevard. I'm here to speak as a taxpayer, also representing two nonprofits with their permission, the Boys and Girls Club of St. Lucie County and Castle, regarding the event production side of things. My business is event production in multiple different facets. I want to call attention to the state of the Civic Center that was reviewed by City Council at retreat this year. You indicated, Tanya prepared that document, indicated that our targeted customer for the Civic Center is a combined household income of $80,000 or more. And I want to call the attention to that in the fact that there's a document that was prepared by Tanya on 2/26 at our citizen focus group regarding the Civic Center, that there were only 7 weddings that took place last year at the Civic Center. My business did 26 weddings in the month of March, and realized that that's with a staff of 11. The point to that is, I believe that the hospitality unit there at the Civic Center, with relation to food and beverage, is really missing their target mark on how we're marketing this facility, which relates to the licensure that's being held there, because I'll speak to the fact of the nonprofits and their voice. They have these large galas, some multiple per year. They're not having them at the Civic Center. They have had them at the Civic Center, and they were very much displeased with different aspects of whether it been service, but mostly the food and beverage portion of that. There aren't options. The taxpayers don't have options. The nonprofits don't have options. So when you go there, it's cut and dry. It's a take it or leave it situation. And as a taxpayer or a person who holds events and throws events, I think that that is a complete disservice to the taxpayer community. I would also like to question, we talked a little bit about holding the licensure and who pays for that. And I think, Michelle, you had said that the entity who is holding the 4 COP should be paying or should have paid for that, is the language, and I would like some clarification on that. Am I, as a taxpayer, paying for the city to hold the licensure there? And not only the licensure, but there's a hefty price tag when it comes to insuring that. So I would like to know, as a taxpayer, am I paying for the Civic Center to hold a license and insurance for the benefit of one private company to make a profit? I would like that answer. I know we also asked in our February 26th Citizen Focus Group meeting, we also asked what the numbers were, and Tanya had provided a document to us that said the catering gross revenue, and this is Tanya's document that was provided to Jeff and some other people that were there, was $300,000, and today I think she spoke and said $400,000. So there was a discrepancy there. The numbers just show that we are maybe looking at holding the wrong events. The facility manager had indicated that weddings and nonprofit events are not profitable. And I'm telling you, as an event producer and on behalf of the event community, that is all how we make our living. I know my business made over $300,000 last year. The Civic Center hospitality side made $14,000 last year. If you look at, again, the state of the Civic Center and you look at your expenses and your revenues per month, I broke it down, they profited $14,000. Okay. The other thing I would like to talk about is the proposal, what my opinion is, if I may, on how we break down or potentially move forward with some of the things that Tanya spoke about earlier. I would like to see multiple choices for food vendors there. I can't speak to the legalities of the licensure as far as how you all are going to decide that. That's going to be a business decision. But as a taxpayer and as an event producer, I know my customers, as well as everyone sitting in this room, would love to have the ability to have choices. We had proposed a remedy to that, alternative to what Tanya had put up here. And the remedy to that would be to have a vetted amount of vendors. Let's just hypothetically say we have 4 incredible caterers here in this community that the Civic Center has vetted and said, we want them to be able to operate under the roof of the Civic Center. They're well enough, they do well, they have all the insurances and the things that they need to be able to have the capacity to hold and produce all the events here as far as food and beverage are related. You wouldn't necessarily have to operate with 2 catering licenses at one time. So I'm going to bring a hypothetical situation. Michelle, you and I have catering companies. Okay, we both have the licensure that's not the 4CO3, the 4COP license. We just have you have to do 51% food. And there are several other. Let me back that up. There are several businesses, catering businesses, that have those additional licenses. So what you would be able to say is, someone came in and booked your company, or booked an event and chose you out of the 4 vendors to say there was a wedding. They chose your company. You then would have all of the events on the property that day. That way we're not crossing any type of licensure. So anything inside, outside, or however that worked out, you would then have all of the events. If a customer came in through the door and said, I'd like to have my event in the Ruby Ballroom because the Emerald is now booked with your event, they would say, this is the catering company that is on site that day. You're eligible to use this company or choose a different day. And then the other 4 companies or 3 companies would have the opportunity if they chose a different day. So the point would be, whatever catering company was on site that day rules the house, kind of a thing. That way you're not juggling multiple caterers at one time. That's an option too.
Ms. Marafa, could you bring your comments to a close, please?
Oh, yes. Just a question about, we talked about it on the 26th of February, about the off-site, the caterer that is operating there now, how many off-site events they did. That number, or that question was also posed back in February, and I just wanted to be noted that we didn't have an answer then, and unfortunately, we still don't have an answer now, so it's disheartening. But that's my recommendation. I'd like to see options.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I have a question.
Okay.
Of the 26 weddings you had in March, how many of them were in the city of Port St. Lucie?
I would say probably a third of them. A third of them.
So only a third of them were in the city of Port St. Lucie?
Right. And none of
Because
them
your
at
service area is what?
Vero to West Palm.
Thank you.
Okay.
But how many were there, 27? 26? So a third is, how many did the city do? 7? So a third is, yeah, still greater. Okay, everyone has spoken who signed up. Is there anyone else out there who'd like to provide their input? If not, we're going to move on to council discussion. Council?
So I have a question that I want to address before we even have the discussions. Now, I know that council has the ability to decide what they want to do moving forward. However, I need to ask a question of staff. Outside of your recommendation to go with the RFP, which I believe is a little different and maybe was done in anticipation of what we may want, what is your recommendation as far as the services provided by the current caterer that is in-house? And have you gone through a process in the 5 years where you've had some measurement as to the feedback and customer service from that caterer? And the reason why I'll just state why I'm asking these questions, because although we can do what we want, I question whether or not it's fair just to do it for the sake of what we want if we don't have valid reasons as far as what is currently in the contract, which is time and performance and service.
I did put together, or staff put together, we do event evaluations. After each event, we send a letter to the client with an evaluation. Part of the evaluation's about their experience with the facility, and then the other part, if applicable, is regarding the food and beverage experience that they have. Overall, the ratings came back on 53 different events. The ratings came back varied from, and this is 1 is the worst, 5 is the best. The overall average rating, and this is the categories: satisfactory food and beverage setup, the average rating was 4.6. Food quality and taste, 4.4. Food temperature, 4.6. Service staff helpfulness, courteousness, 4.5. Appropriate food and beverage pricing, 4.1.
And what time period was this over?
This was over the last probably 2 years' worth of events that we did receive feedback from. Now, obviously, not everybody returns them, but the ones we did receive back. We did have 2 to be appropriate, and I can provide this to everyone. Transparent. We did have 2 appropriate food and beverage pricing that scored gave it a 1. We had 4 that gave it a 2, 10 that gave it a 3, and 9 that gave it a 4, and 28 that gave it the best. Also, that was the only one that was received was in regarding appropriate food and beverage pricing. But I can provide this for the council.
So what was the total on the final column?
It's 53 surveys. And this is what their responses were of the 53.
So how many were under 3.5? How many were under 3? 3 or under?
3 or under?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This one didn't tally it. I thought I had one that I tallied everything.
Maybe you can bring that back to us then. I mean, from a statistics standpoint, when you start throwing out customer service numbers, there's a whole system out there that many companies pay. It's called Net Promoter Score.
Okay.
And it's done in hospitality and retail. And an overall number of 53 is not a big sampling.
No.
But from a perspective of what the overall score is, the overall score doesn't matter. It's where it falls within that overall score, how many fell under the median. And so those are the kinds of dig-in questions. You cannot go by just an average score of 4.67 on 53 out of a 2-year period.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Shannon, the floor was yours.
I have a question, and this question is directed to the city manager. And actually, for me, it's simple yes or no question. Maybe for you it might be not, but would you categorize the meeting of the 26th as a focus group meeting that you had with certain individuals?
A focus group. It was, I think the focus obviously was to talk about the catering service for the Civic Center. So in terms of me and my attendance and staff's attendance, we were there to listen as we moved forward with consideration of an RFP and where we were going. So I view it more as an input than a focus group. I mean, we heard suggestions, we heard ideas, we heard comments, and that was just a part of our overall review as to where we might want to take this particular issue.
Okay, so then another question is, did you expect there to be conversations with regard to the job descriptions of the Civic Center employees at that meeting? And the fact that they were passed around and given out without the knowledge of the city manager's office, knowing that they were provided?
There was no discussion relative to job descriptions that I recall.
Not what this says in the memo. Should also be noted that came to my attention during the meeting, all Civic Center employee job descriptions were provided to the mayor prior to the meeting and had been shared with some of the people who attended the meeting. I have attached the same job descriptions to this memo, and I'm referring to a memo of March 4th from Tanya to you.
Yes, it was never discussed in the meeting, but we were aware that job descriptions were gathered or collected by some of the attendees.
Well, if it wasn't discussed during the meeting, then how did it come to your attention during the meeting if it wasn't discussed?
I don't recall exactly. It may have been even before just general conversation and coming into the meeting.
Shannon, I'd like to understand your question better. Is there a time when we should or shouldn't distribute public records?
It has nothing to do about public records, because if job descriptions are public records, then of course they should be available. So, but what I'm questioning is whether this has to do solely with regard to catering, or if there's underlying issues with regard to the total management of the Civic Center. Because from what I gather from this memo, I read it a little bit differently of what occurred in that in that meeting.
So what's your question?
What I'm saying is I think there's a little bit more to this than what the subject is at hand. And I'll leave it at that.
What is the definition of this item or this discussion or the meeting of February?
Well, since it all ties together, I think all of it. So that's why I'm questioning, because when I've had conversations as to the reason for this memo, I got a little bit of a different answer.
Can I get a copy of the memo? I don't have a copy of the memo, so I don't know what we're talking about.
Well, it says on here that it was asked to be forwarded to all council members.
And I can only speak to the meeting that I attended, and over the course of my career since the Civic's been here, I've received a number of questions regarding the Civic Center. I definitely received a lot of questions as I campaigned for this position of mayor, and I continue to receive questions about the Civic Center, and more than questions, I also receive comments. So in order to respond to questions, I scheduled a meeting. I had a meeting. I asked staff to attend, which they did, which we do all the time. Staff provided information, discussed it with the constituents, and left it at that. There's no subterfuge or anything. I mean, and that's why it was important for me to ask a clarifying question, because I just want to know where you're coming from. Had a constituent meeting today about development of an O'Reilly's Auto Parts store, and you know, we have meetings all the time, so I don't see this as being any different. But I'm never scared of the elephant in the room. The Civic Center has been an issue. It will continue to be an issue. I personally don't think it's realized its full potential. I'm personally thinking that we can do better, and that the RFP is a way to do that. And I've openly communicated my expectations for a long time on the Civic Center. I've been transparent. What was interesting to me, though, is that in my discussions with the city manager, I thought that he had a different position than came out. So before, you made a comment about where it was headed, why it was heading that way, and you were questioning why things were going that way. I'll say that this is different than I expected, and I mean, all questions will be answered, though. This council will give direction on whether it wants to do an RFP or not, and if it wants to do an RFP, what parameters there'll be. So let's get into that. But there was no, from where I sit, there was nothing more than a meeting with concerned constituents. And yes, they definitely have an angle on it, because a lot of them were in the business. But that happens every time. Thank you.
I would say that maybe the Civic Center hasn't reached a certain level of potential, but I also know for you, but I also know that the council, past councils, including the current council, has set parameters with regard to expectation. And from every time I've received a report on what that is from a number standpoint, they've exceeded that expectation from that standpoint that we set, because we said that we didn't expect it to be a huge revenue generator, but we wanted it to reach a certain point. Now, if there's to be a discussion on policy where we want that to change, then I guess we're going to have that discussion. But so far as I know, there hasn't been a change in that discussion.
Well, I'm at a loss as to why I couldn't meet with constituents about the Civic Center. What's wrong with that? Even if the Civic Center was running perfectly, what's wrong with meeting with constituents talking about the city?
There's nothing wrong with meeting with constituents. But when you go into a meeting and different things occur that aren't expected, or things come out of it that weren't expected, and then memos come out, I look at it and certain things raise in my head.
I mean,
and so I have a right to ask questions about what occurred in that meeting, especially when I have a document in front of me that lists certain things.
Well, I mean, just to be plain, what do you think happened that was bad or inappropriate?
Well, I specifically asked if those job descriptions, if the city manager knew about those job descriptions going out, and I was told that he wasn't aware of it. So normally when we get things from staff, we go through the city manager's office. So then I said, I wonder where they all came from then, and then why would it be a circumstance where the city manager is in a meeting and he's not made aware that these things, even though they are public record, that they have been handed out, when normally in order to get the information that we request, we go through the city manager's office to get that information. Just seems strange to me. So that's when I saw it, I asked the question.
Who knows where the source of those, I don't personally recall. I mean, I have a folder in my office at home that has the Civic Center book. There's a State of the Civic Center book, and I could probably also get it through a public records request. I don't understand the interest in where what's clearly a public record originated and that it got into the hands of the citizens. It just seems strange to me, ma'am.
It doesn't seem strange to me, but I'll leave it at that.
May I?
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm looking forward to reading the memo, because it sounds like there's concerns in there. And I would say that, this is a great opportunity that if the author of the memo feels as though there was something that made you uncomfortable, this is the time to really speak to it, and we can make sure that we open it. I haven't read the memo, but I don't want to put you in a position to have to speak to it. But what I will do is I'll do this. While you're thinking about what you want to say, or if you want to say anything, I want to transition, because you jogged my memory, public records. So public records laws, as far as I understand them, mandate that if you are doing business with the city of Port St. Lucie, that you must have your books open for review. Case in point, Saints, when they had the Saints cafeteria, whatever you want to call it, at each time they had a new vendor in there. They had to make their books available to us. Botanical Garden Friends, we recently asked to take a look at their information. Anybody that has those kind of dealings understands that your books must be open and available. So from my point of view, and again, I'm not an attorney, I just like to play one at the dais, if the contract says that a vendor is utilizing our product to create a new product and then is paying us for that product, then even if that event is off-site, that paperwork, by my understanding of Florida records, must be available for review. total review. So if there are 14 events that occurred outside the city of Port St. Lucie, then in order for us to be compliant, I would ask that we take a look at that and see what those next steps look like from a public record standpoint. That's my thought that came up. So thank you for jogging my memory on that. My question, follow-up question, is around what is and isn't working already. So in the Botanical Gardens, we currently allow multiple caterers, basically like what we're talking about as an option, to utilize that facility. So I'm wondering how that's working. So as you're looking at surveys and presenting surveys, I'm wondering what the surveys look like for the frequenters of the Botanical Gardens to see how they feel. And then question around the SCX license, which is the one that we currently own. Can we keep that SCX license under a different version of a city name? And so my thought is, as the backup, as Jeff was saying, if there's an option for backup, can we back it up by having maybe the Police Athletic League as a name on that? You know, that way they could come in if they needed to and create the backup. Or having if the address of the location is different, because it can only be one under one roof. So if it's the city of Port St. Lucie and it's at the Botanical Gardens or it's at the community center instead of just at the Civic Center. No, Tony? But those are my questions. Is so as being able to, you know, if there's a concern and you want a contingency plan, Plan B, and want to keep the SCX, then those are some things I would look into to see how we can associate ourselves with groups that we are already connected to because we sponsor them. And I did write down how much was the cost of the license. Do we know how much the cost of the license is? I think we heard 150, but is that?
For the license that is
COP?
co-held.
The 4 COP?
The 4 COP SCX license, I believe that was for, the renewal is in the $400 ballpark for that one.
For
and that is
renewal?
paid by the licensed concessionaire.
And how much
license
was
provider.
it? How much was it to get it to begin with?
I will have to find that out for you. Initially, for some reason, I'm thinking, I don't know if you have that, Brennan, but somewhere around $1,800. But again, that was paid for by the current concessionaire.
Maybe we can get that information, because that should be easy enough to pull up.
There's, if I may, Mayor, to answer some of the questions that Ms. Berger's raised, on the handout that Brennan gave to you guys, on page 2, it lists the Special Civic Center license, the SCX that we've been talking about, and it lists several options underneath that with the 8 COP, 7 COP, 6 COP, 5 and 4 COP, and it has in parentheses the cost. It appears to be $250 from this. There was a question raised earlier about the concessionaire and whether or not he pays for that. Again, on page 4 of 26 of the existing contract with the concessionaire, it does say the concessionaire must obtain and pay for the 4 COP license. That is separate. One of the individuals who spoke mentioned that license. That's a catering portion of it. At the time this was done, Dominique's did have his separate catering license. That does allow them to do different events. However, with the rules in place, the license is only per location. A map is provided when we apply for the liquor license for the entire premises, facility, address, so you can't have multiple SCX licenses at this location. It's just the one location. And one more comment on here, there's information in here, part of the verification process and what has taken place before is the sales and use tax that's required as part of the license also. That lists a specific dollar revenue. They pay taxes based on that. That's part of the verification process for the city to ensure that we're getting the adequate percentages that are set forth in the contract.
Say that last part again, the sales tax, the information that they turn into the IRS, basically?
Yes.
Additional questions or discussion?
I guess my additional comments would be just as, to your view, Shannon, about, well, what else? There's got to, you can't just say you want to change your mind and do something different. First of all, just as I'm sure the current contractor remembers, I'm not changing my mind. I believe this is the way to go when we went this way the first time, as far as going out for an RFP with, the option of having multiple caterers. So from my point of view, that's what works. That's what keeps many people employed and gives the options and the choices to the people that are paying for the building and the others that are coming in from outside. I appreciate hearing about the market, because one of the things I've not done is I haven't interviewed people in this industry, honestly. So to hear that we have the market that is, producing large, significant events, in a span of areas over a course of a month, and then we take a look and say, well, how does that relate to what's going on in the Civic Center? My point of view and the way I protect and defend the Civic Center has been for a long time, you can't get in there. It's booked. It's completely booked. It's doing a great job, and it is booked. But when I heard somebody say the right events, is it booked with the right events? I don't know, because I don't really know that market. But I think there's an opportunity for us to take a look at what we do here. I've never interviewed anybody from that industry, but I can tell you, I hear from people that have tried to use the facility and people that have used the facility. And I have offered and given to the city manager and city manager's office feedback from individuals and organizations, for-profit organizations and nonprofit organizations here in the county and also from Martin County, who have given me direct feedback with specific examples about why they were unhappy with the service. I will tell you that they are very happy with, is it Lauren? Laura. They mention this person often about, the person that helps them get it set up and get it going. But from a perspective of, are they happy with the final product? The answer is typically no, and the reference is to the catering itself. And it's not necessary to get into the details of that unless you force me to, in which case I can. And each person that I brought the information to the city manager, before I did that, I said, if this has to come to a public record, your name or your organization might be brought up. And they were so upset that they were all fine with it. So if need be, well, you can go there, but I'd rather not. And for me, that's enough to say it's time to see if there's a market for this RFP. And, we may put it out there and find there's not a market, and maybe it doesn't work. And I appreciate the feedback that it's not, it's not easy for staff to have to deal with multiple vendors there. And it's not, I know I've heard feedback from the beginning when we first started this, we put our equipment at risk when we have multiple people going in and utilizing the equipment. But everybody that's in there has to put a bond up, basically. And so we're not putting anything at risk. And every time we lose people because they won't come here, I'm telling you, we've lost a return of the investment that's greater and higher than what we would lose on maintenance issues within the kitchen. And it's our brand. And we started up here, and we're not here anymore from what I hear out in the community. And we all like to refer to that what's become a very basic book now, from good to great. But you have to acknowledge where we're at before we can get better. And if you can't see what success looks like everywhere else, then I need to tell you, you got to get out of Port St. Lucie and go see what's happening somewhere else. And to see the level of service and the exquisite events that occur. And we have the facility to make the same exact thing happen, and to have great feedback, and to possibly have a higher quality event with a higher number of events. And it's really the time for us to take a look at it and say, can we be better? Mediocre is not okay, and that's where we're at. Thank you.
Just to ask a clarifying question. Were you at least on a preliminary basis, in favor of one alcoholic beverage provider and multiple caterers?
Yes. And we talked about that and way back when, too, because the biggest question was, how are we going to supply the alcohol? That was a big question when we were first going that route. And I kept asking the question, well, wait a minute, when I went to this place, because this was years and years ago, how were they able to just offer me one and then all these other things? And for some, at that point, we just didn't have the information. So I don't know if we just didn't do enough research from the staff's point of view and getting in, and I myself did not read a whole lot of information about liquor licenses. That's, I have a whole floor of attorneys that work here that are supposed to be able to do that, right? So, we trust what you guys tell us. And I want to be very clear and not, dig in too deep, but we trust what you tell us. And, when you come to a meeting here and you realize that had we not had a discussion about what next steps could be and that there's a certain timeline, I appreciate that you said you guys knew the timeline. I didn't know the timeline. And if you're not going to tell me that if I don't make a decision to move forward by a certain time, that we automatically, somebody gets grandfathered in, that's a lie by omission. And it's the only thing I can say is that that's what concerns me the most about this meeting today, is finding out that I didn't have enough information. And I don't even know what to say about that. It's very concerning.
Thank you, ma'am. Who's up next?
So, one question. So, if we separate the two, and we have one person handling liquor, and they hold the license without us being a part of it, the city being a part of it, what happens if that person walks and we can't make sure that event happens because they have liquor? And you have 1 day's notice and you can't get someone to handle that event.
Are you, excuse me, referring to the fact that if it was just one on-site alcohol provider that held his or her own license, not the SCX?
Correct.
Then that would be the scenario where, number one, remember the 5149. Number two, if they could not, then we would have to look at those others that potentially have the quota or the 13 CT and ensure that we're following the parameters, the 5149. So we would have to scramble to get that. It can be done, but we would have to.
So, from what I know, and I am no caterer, but from what I know about catering, and I could be wrong, so I just want to make sure I'm right in what I'm saying. Most caterers make more money off the liquor than they do off food. Is that fair or not correct?
In my experience, it is the return on investment of that, meaning your overhead is much less with alcohol than it is with food. At the end of the day, the dollar amount is going to probably be more. It is more, in our case at the Civic Center, more money gross is made on food because of the amount of it than the alcohol itself. But again, the cost related is different.
But then the ratio, the scenario with the 5149, even though to the Civic Center, that you have more as far as gross with the food, it's not an optimal scenario, because then the caterer constantly has to account for whether it's a 51 to 49 split, doing it that way?
We would have to do that, yes, without the SCX license, yes. The 4COP quota, which would then mean the holder of the 4COP does not have to do the food, but someone there who has the catering license would have to do the food in that ratio. And that is the way, am I correct in saying that, Brendan, when we met with the representative? That's how I understood it.
I think in your scenario, we would most likely probably have to bring in someone with a 4 COP. I believe Mr. Freitas was his name, has a 4 COP quota. We would have to bring someone in who has that license to serve the alcohol. Would probably be the safest way to play it. If I was running the event, I think that would probably be. I don't know how that works on a short-term basis, though. I'm not in the catering business, so I can't answer that question.
You can't call out from the audience. You can come to the microphone if, do you want to hear the answer to that or no?
Yeah.
Please go to the microphone, sir.
We're throwing out all these things, and I just want to be able to try to wrap my head around the differences.
Ms. Shannon, you asked, where's the money, right? That's the question. Is it the food or is it the liquor? Is that the question?
That was the first question, yes.
You want me to answer that one?
Yes.
I will answer that one. It's always the liquor. The reason why is because the liquor is a bigger percentage than the food. And that's why when it's a gross number, you guys would make more money on liquor than you would on food. And if you're not making it on the liquor, then there's just something that's not right with the percentages, that the pricing that you have, or just that you might be pricing yourself out of the ball game. So the answer to that is liquor is quicker. You make more money. Is there any other questions? So I don't have to yell out.
Do you have any?
So
It's my understanding the threshold wouldn't apply if the 13 CT caterers are on site just doing the food. And then obviously we're assuming we no longer have an SCX license, because if we did, then no one could serve alcohol but us. So under this scenario, this is where we're relinquishing our SCX license, just to throw that out there.
Ms. Shannon, the other question you asked, if somebody was to walk away. If somebody was to walk away, somebody with a 13 CT can come in and do the food 51%. And if you have the caterers, multiple caterers, we all normally have a 13 CT. So if that was the case and somebody was to walk away, you have two options. The guy that came in second, or the guy that even came in third with the 4 COP, or the caterers have their own 13 CT. The only problem that you would have is if you have multiple things going on, it would be only one guy that could do the liquor with the 13 CT, because there's only one license under the roof. So if I have one, somebody else has one, and somebody else has one, there's only one guy that's serving liquor that day. And you'd make more money because you would be able to do the outside events of the Civic Center, and you would make more money because you would also make more money with the way, I lost my train of thought, I'm a little old now, I'm getting a little crazy. But, and the other way that you make money with the 4 COP is now you have the promoters that want to come in and do a party. Well, they come in, they talk to a guy like me, and I say, okay, well, Southern Eagle or whoever, Jack Daniels, Captain Morgan, this is our guy, he's having a party. They will give him money. They will give him product, which helps the Civic Center make more money on top of money, because now you have promoters saying, you know what, if I go in there, this person's going to give me 5,000, this guy's going to give me 50 kegs, this guy's going to give me some money for the Jack Daniels, and that's the beauty of having the 4 COP. You can't do that with a 13 CT. The 13 CT has to buy from a liquor store. The 4 COP has to buy from a Southern Eagle or Premier, and what they do is they talk to the promoter and say, hey, look, we want the event here. Here's 5,000, here's 2,000. They're able to give it to the 5013C, and law states with the 5013C that they get 100% of the proceeds, and not 10%, not 20%, 100%.
Thank you, sir. Do you have any more questions? Thank you.
I was rolling. All right.
I have a follow-up to Shannon's if you're done.
The floor is hers. Do you have
Go
a
ahead.
clarifying question?
Go ahead.
So one of the things that Shannon had asked, guys, is that what if the main guy walks away? How do you make sure that the event is fulfilled and taken care of? But if I understand it correctly, we have had our current contractor not able to fulfill some of the events, like at the rooftop events where we've called other people to come out and do them, yes?
the rooftop event and any of the other events in Village Square were never covered under the CSX license. That was never an option available through the Civic Center option. We did that purposefully from the beginning so that we could open it up, and those venues and the rooftop, I mean, the parking garage has been kind of a new scenario for us, and it's working out very well. But with Village Square, we knew going into that we really wanted to leave that open to allow for groups to come in, such as with Freedom Fest, that our own city events, the Lions Club takes care of that. And that's a good relationship. We've also, other people who rent it then have the ability to use anyone that they choose for that area. So we did not ever put that under our 4COP. That would be covered under potentially a 13CT, and we've talked about that before, where there is the food and the alcohol involved, and someone holding a 13CT could very well do the rooftop or do the Village Square events.
So more clarification, a 4COP, in my head I was thinking that was like for full alcohol, like, you know, like rum and vodka,
Correct.
and not just beer and wine?
Correct.
But then, so these other vendors that are out in the square when we have events like the Lions, they're just serving beer, right?
They are, but they can serve liquor as well. They just choose not to do the liquor.
Okay. So then when we have them out there, and then we have the current caterer that's with the city out there, and then we have another vendor that's serving alcohol out there, are we breaking laws because we've got multiple people?
We do not have multiple people
completely
doing events, doing liquor at our outdoor events. We do not have multiple
at the seafood
that I've ever seen.
At the seafood event, we were.
Well, let me just ask a
Just understand.
clarifying question. What about at like a St. Patrick's Day where we have someone serving hard alcohol, like Dominic's or someone else, and then the co-producer of the event serving beer, wine
Right.
under a tent?
That falls under the special event license that the nonprofit was to secure. That does allow for them to serve beer,
Dominic's
alcohol.
also?
If they so choose, from what to do that, I don't
I've
recall
seen
that scenario,
well,
but
I've seen events where I thought Dominic's bartender is set up and there's a beer tent.
at some events, yes, that is the case. And for example, seafood recently was the case. And Dominic does have a current 13CT license and insurance that allows him to do those events.
So it's legal to have two entities serving alcohol at the same time? Make sure you get
You have
this
an
one
attorney
right.
next to you.
I know, I'm trying to understand the scenario because I don't recall ever seeing that specific scenario where we would allow for something like that. It would fall under what the nonprofit wanted to do. And if the nonprofit wanted, it would fall under their license. And if they wanted to have, say, Dominic's assist them with that, that could happen. I don't know if that's happened or if that's the case, so I'm not.
You're telling me that you've never seen a special event where we had one entity under a beer tent and Dominic's with a full bar?
If it happened, it occurred under the nonprofit license, the 3-day special nonprofit alcohol permit. That's what it would be under. Because you can only have one out there.
So the floor was yours. I asked a
Sorry.
clarifying question. Thank you.
So the reason why, I mean, it may have been fallen under, I'd like to think that we've been following the law, because this is all new to me with all this liquor law, but I can tell you that I can't drink beer, as you know, I've got that gluten allergy, so I can't drink beer. So there have been multiple events that my husband's online over getting it, either at Guinness or whatever, wherever the beer is, Lions Club area, and I'm online somewhere else to get like a rum punch bowl kind of thing,
Okay.
because that's all I can have as a drink. So those are two different lines, those are two different groups. And I guess what you're saying is that it's all falling underneath the nonprofits. So This is just very confusing to me, very concerning.
I can look into the requirements of the special event license and then provide that to council.
I'd like to see the details on that.
And I'm pretty sure I go to other events. So, I mean, it's not just the city of Port St. Lucie. Like, I mean, when I went to this seafood festival in Stewart, they had the same thing where they had a beer vendor in one place, and then they had, I thought it was like a regular bar there, so maybe they were covered. So I'm not saying that I don't see it in other places too. I just want to make sure that we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, I think it's important that we are doing the right thing and following the rules.
Since you're the attorney, yes.
Regardless, I'll look into that just so we're not skirting any rules or anything.
So we've had some very detailed discussion. Council, I'd like to know where you're at so that staff has direction. We can figure out what the will of the majority is. Shannon, are you able to share your position?
I think I need some more time to look over all this and to ask some more questions of staff and to go through the different scenarios.
Okay, so you'd like to see it come back to the council?
Yes, because, yes.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
One of the things that I would like to know, and I did a little bit of research while we were talking, is what other cities are doing. And what I'm seeing is that many cities and communities have a convention center, have a civic center, and they have one vendor for food and drink. So I'd like to see how we compare to that. And because I don't know enough about the businesses, everything I've seen, I heard Jimmy say, well, I do this, and I do this, and I do this, and I know Jane's husband does Ballantrae. There are one vendor there. When I go there to do a wedding or to do a party, I don't have a choice. So this is not that, as far as I can see, this is not that unusual. But I'd like to see more information come back to us and have the opportunity to get some more questions answered.
Okay, so you'd like to see it come back?
Yep.
All right. And while I think that there's a number of items to be buttoned up, and I think that we can do better in a lot of things here, I do not think my position is going to change with the additional information. When the city went down the path of selecting a single caterer, it was because it thought that the Civic Center would function like a convention center, like it would be West Palm or any number of places where it functioned in conjunction with the hotel and ran large events solely. And I don't think that that's borne out. That's why Aramark pulled out. It's a different type of venue. And I look at Martin County and other communities which have found a way to allow for multiple caterers. And why do they do that? Well, they do it because the success of a lot of these facilities is a function of the quality of the facility and then a quality of the food and the beverage and the choice and the personal relationship that exists a lot of times between a caterer and a client. And a lot of clients stay with a caterer for years. And we're missing out by only having, I believe that we're missing out by only having one caterer there. I think that you can go through a competitive process whereby you get a number of caterers that meet your minimum thresholds, and I think the council has the freedom to set those thresholds so you get high-quality operators that are registered, and instead of one person or one team marketing our facility, you have 4 or 5, and I think there's a lot of value in that. I think that's leverage. I think that's exponential growth or the ability to achieve it. I see comments like, well, it'll be more difficult for staff for it to be accountable. Well, that's what bonds and checklists and staff people who are paid for by the person renting the facility are for. And other places have solved that problem. I think we can. I think Shannon put out the question, what if the bartender walks away? And heaven forbid that someone who was properly vetted walks away, but I guess it could happen. And actually it has happened with special events before where we've had to get someone else in the community to step in. We've been able to do that on the special events side, which is literally across the street, not at the Civic Center, but across the street, and at the Village Green Shopping Center when we had it. But how is that different from when the caterer walks? I mean, heaven forbid the caterer walks at the last minute. Got to find a new caterer. That's just the way it goes. There's some type of emergency that made that happen. So it was unforeseen, and you can get around it. So I'm in favor of multiple caterers. It seems like it'd be preferable to have one liquor vendor just because of the controls, the liability angle, but I'm open to whatever council may opine on that, but definitely in favor of multiple caterers. But we have 2 that are in favor of that system and 2 that would like more information. So, Mr. Manager, can you bring this back, and when do you think it'll come back?
We can prepare the information. I would suggest bringing it back at the first meeting in May. And we'll have that conversation. In the meantime, we're going to send out the proper notice of a termination so that we can cover ourselves in the event that, regardless, if you go with one, we're going to go with an RFP. If you go with multiple, we're going to go with an RFP. So we want to make sure we preserve our rights to do that. So we would go and we would give a notification, the 180-day notification, and move forward.
Thank you, and you actually, through your statement, pose or present another question, and that is, Shannon, Linda, do you want to stay with the current vendor? Is that, because I don't know, is that still a question? Do you just want to renew, or are you comfortable with staff doing that? I don't want staff to do something that a majority of this council may not be comfortable with.
Well, I'd like to get information, come back before I make that decision, and I'd also like to find out, given the fact that the current caterer is, has to put in writing what his interest is. I'd like to know whether the current caterer plans on letting us know if he's still interested in providing the service.
Intent to continue serving?
Yes, because that hasn't happened yet, and I think the date was the 29th, if I'm not mistaken, that they had until give us notice of that.
And so, I guess I asked the council then, Jeff just said that he was going to send a notice out. Do you want him to do that before you make your decision?
Well, I don't want to put the city in a position where we can't give the notice. So, and we won't be meeting before that date comes, since without cause, we have to give a 180-day notice. Is that correct? So, in order to be fair, we have to do that regardless, it seems like. Otherwise, that time period expires.
Well, but if the council wanted to just renew the contract, could do that, could it not? Could the city not just renew the contract with the current vendor?
Yes.
That's an option, right?
Technically.
So I don't want to, assume what your decision is going to be. So
Well, I don't think you have the votes. We're missing a council person, and you don't have the votes to swing it either way at this point.
Well, we can't vote here anyway, just to be
Right,
fair.
and we
Right.
can't hear it anyway, so it has to come before us.
right, but Jeff said that he was going to go out and issue that letter. I thought I heard. So I don't want you to do that, Mr. Manager. Having been a manager before, I don't want you to do that if it's possible that council doesn't want you to do that.
Well, the problem is, we have until a certain date, and are we going to meet, do we have a meeting before that date?
No.
In order to do that? And if we don't, and we don't have a full council,
Okay.
May 4th.
Question, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
To Pam, can we not rescind that if that were to be the will of the council to just renew the contract?
You can, if that's the will of the council at that May 11th meeting. If
Okay.
that's the direction of the
So-
council to go with the renewal, yes, that notice can be rescinded.
So the letter can go out and then be rescinded if so, if that's the desire.
Yes.
Okay. Well, then I think we have a roadmap. Any additional comments? No? This meeting's adjourned.